I brought my affair partner home and told my husband, he wants you to share me with him, and you can't refuse. My husband quietly left the room, then I heard the toilet flush. When he returned, he held something that made my heart pound. What happened next sent chills down my spine and turned my life into a nightmare. I entered the living room with Mark, a man I'd been secretly seeing for a few months. John, my husband, sat on the couch engrossed in a TV show. His face lit up with a smile when he saw me, but it quickly faded when he noticed Mark standing beside me. "John, we need to talk," I said, my voice trembling slightly. John turned off the TV and glanced at me, confusion clouding his expression. "This is Mark," I continued, gesturing towards him. "He wants you to share me with him, and we can't say no." John's face drained of color. He didn't respond, just stood up abruptly and walked out of the room without a word. The sound of the toilet flushing followed, echoing in the silence that settled between Mark and me. Mark shrugged nonchalantly, his demeanor betraying no hint of concern. We stood there awkwardly, unsure of what would happen next. Minutes ticked by slowly, each one stretching the tension in the air. I glanced nervously at the closed door, waiting for John to return. What would he say? How would he react? I couldn't fathom the storm brewing in his mind. After what felt like an eternity, footsteps approached. John re-entered the room, his expression unreadable. In his hand, he held something, a small silver keychain dangling from his fingers, catching the light. "What's that?" I asked hesitantly, my voice barely audible. John remained composed, his gaze steady. "This," he said calmly, "is the key to a new beginning." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning I couldn't quite grasp. Mark shifted uneasily beside me, sensing the gravity of the moment. John continued, his voice steady but tinged with quiet anger. "You bring another man into our home, into our marriage, and expect me to accept this?" I swallowed hard, feeling a knot of guilt and fear tightening in my chest. "John, you've made your choice," he interrupted sharply, cutting through my feeble attempt at explanation. "Now you'll both face the consequences." He turned and walked away, leaving Mark and me stunned and apprehensive about what lay ahead. John returned to the room, a small object tightly gripped in his hand. My heart sank as I recognized it, a familiar small box, the one where we kept our wedding rings. He held it out, his expression unreadable, and opened it slowly to reveal its empty interior. "I flushed our wedding rings down the toilet," John stated calmly, his voice steady but laced with restrained emotion. "I guess we won't be needing them anymore." Shock and disbelief washed over me. The weight of his actions hit me like a physical blow. I exchanged a glance with Mark, who stood by awkwardly, unsure of how to react to the escalating situation. John placed the empty box on the table with deliberate care and returned to the couch, his posture relaxed but his eyes burning with an intensity I had never seen before. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the distant hum of appliances and the faint ticking of a clock. I struggled to find words to make sense of the turmoil swirling inside me. "John, why?" I began, my voice trembling. "Why?" John cut in sharply, his tone betraying a mix of hurt and righteous anger. "Because you brought another man into our marriage, into our home, and expected everything to remain the same." His words struck a nerve, a painful reminder of the choices I had made and their consequences. Guilt gnawed at me, mingling with fear of what would come next. Mark shifted uncomfortably, breaking the tense silence. "John, maybe we should." "No," John interrupted firmly, his gaze fixed on me. "There's no we anymore." I felt the weight of his words like a lead weight on my chest. The reality of his actions, the symbolic flushing away of our marriage, left me reeling. Tears welled up in my eyes, a mixture of remorse and helplessness washing over me. John's expression softened slightly as he glanced at me, a flicker of pain crossing his features before he composed himself again. "This is how it has to be," he said quietly, more to himself than to us. Mark remained silent, his presence a reminder of the rift I had caused. I wanted to reach out, to undo the damage, but John's calm resolve and the emptiness of the ring box were stark reminders of the irreparable breach between us. Hours passed in strange silence, each minute stretching into eternity. Mark eventually excused himself, leaving me alone with John and the echoes of what had transpired. He retreated to our bedroom, shutting the door with a finality that underscored the end of our shared life. Alone in the living room, I sat numbly on the couch, grappling with the devastating consequences of my actions. The weight of John's quiet anger and his deliberate gestures, the flushed rings, the emptied box, pressed down on me like a heavy burden. As night descended outside, casting shadows across the room, I realized with a sinking feeling that John's calm exterior masked a storm of hurt and betrayal. The object in his hand had become a symbol of our shattered trust and the unraveling of everything we had built together. "Why are you doing this?" John's voice cut through the tense air, his tone steady but tinged with hurt. His eyes, usually warm and comforting, now held a glint of anguish as he confronted me. Tears welled up in my eyes as I struggled to find the right words. "I love you, John," I managed to say, my voice choked with emotion. "But I also love Mark. I thought we could make this work together." John shook his head slowly, his disbelief palpable. "You can't have both of us," he said quietly, his words carrying the weight of finality. "You made your choice the moment you brought him into our home." Mark, sensing the tension, stepped forward tentatively. "Maybe we can talk about this," he suggested, his voice calm but uncertain. "We can find a solution that works for everyone." John's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing with resolve. The only solution I see, he said, his tone cutting through the air like a knife, is for you to leave. Both of you. The stark reality of his words hung in the room, each syllable driving home the depth of his hurt and betrayal. I glanced at Mark, silently pleading for him to say something, to offer a way to bridge the chasm that had opened up between us. Mark hesitated, visibly grappling with the gravity of the situation. John, please, he started, his voice wavering slightly. We care about you. We don't, John interrupted sharply, his gaze flickering between us. Don't pretend this is about caring. The room fell silent again, the tension thickening with each passing moment. I felt the weight of John's accusation, the guilt of my actions pressing down on me like a heavy burden. How had everything spiraled out of control so quickly? I never wanted to hurt you, I whispered, my voice barely audible amidst the charged atmosphere. John's expression softened for a fleeting moment, a shadow of the love and warmth we had once shared flickering in his eyes. But you did, he said quietly, his voice tinged with sorrow. You shattered everything we had. I reached out tentatively, wanting to touch him, to erase the pain etched on his face, but he stepped back, his retreat a physical manifestation of the emotional distance that now separated us. Mark shifted uncomfortably, unsure of his place in the unfolding drama. John, maybe we should give each other some time, he suggested tentatively, his voice tinged with uncertainty. John's gaze hardened, his resolve solidifying. Time won't change what you've done, he said firmly. You both need to leave now. The finality of his words hung in the air, leaving no room for argument or negotiation.